My name is Bob Campbell. I'll be the moderator for the evening. I'll be introducing the panel in a minute. Simple housekeeping things. Take your cell phones out and put them on whatever that is, no fly, or shut it off, or turn it off, or bury it, whatever you have to do with it. Washrooms, men's and ladies over there, disabled that way. So, got those basic things out of the way. We're going to begin this evening with an opening prayer by Elliot Fox in lieu of land acknowledgement, which is always a part of the SACPA presentations. And then I will just review the format of the evening for you before introducing the panel. So, Elder Fox.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for, I may as well make my introduction now. Yeah, I just want to thank the SACPA, for inviting me to the panel discussion tonight. Very honored to be here to talk about a really important topic to all of us. Yeah, so I'm going to start off my prayer in our Blackfoot language. So you can join me. You can pray however you want to whatever higher power you believe in. So please join me. Ayo napi natusi. Ayo kipitaki. Spunktat utapis. Kustakoi. Itapuit. Kustakoi. Aksukapi. Akkanapa. Ohki. Aksukapi. Kimukinan. Matapiks. Utapisi. Kimukinan. Itskinaix, Kanatsumitex, Kakoix, Moktokiix, Sixagatsitapia, Spumptat, Aksukapia, Kana, Gamotan. Yeah, thank you. I just prayed for our to have a good meeting tonight, to have some good discussion, and to pray that our water stays clean so we can have water to live. It's the essence of life. Anyway, I'll make my formal introduction when I talk. But anyway, thank you, and hopefully we'll have a good discussion.
Thank you, Elliot. So, before introducing the panel, now several of you have been given were handed out sheets to write your questions on, and I think those are being sorted through right now, and I will be reading some of those as we... Okay, well, it'll be right there. Okay, and I will start off with the first question after the panelists give their specific presentations. Each panelist will have approximately between 5 and 6 minutes to give their position and their views, and then we will begin the question period. Your questions, when you're asked, try to direct them to specific panel members, or if whoever, will sort that out as it goes along, but we want to make sure that this runs smoothly. The panelists will then have approximately 1 minute to reply to the questions, and it'll move along smoothly. I know you're a very polite group. Now, I want to also mention that I know that some of you have some very strong feelings on this issue, and we also want to know that we each respect each other's right to have those opinions and to express those opinions, but let's do so in a civilized, democratic manner. So that's the beginning, and so we will now begin with our panel tonight. We'll begin, you know Chris, we know Chris Spearman probably needs no introduction in Lethbridge. But anyway, and then, of course, Mandy will be speaking, and then Gavin, and then Elliot in that order. And so, with that, Chris, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, this is going to be a problem. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. The light's on. Nothing's happening. You're on.
We already tested it 10 times before.
All right. Starting now, I'll be talking about the Grassy Mountain project. Really, the concerns that we have and the requests for clarifications that have yet to be answered. The things I want to talk about are the type of mining that has yet to take place at Grassy Mountain. Secondly, the reliance on the Alberta Energy Regulator for enforcement. The third thing I'd like to talk about is the coal policy consultation process. The fourth thing is that decisions and agreements are being made unilaterally without consultation. The fifth is respect for the law and the due process and the court decisions is not happening. The sixth is that opening all the eastern slopes in order to avoid legal challenges is a bogus thing for the government to say. The next, the business case. Does it make sense to put 40,000 jobs in the agri-food industry at risk to create 400 jobs at a coal mine in the headwaters of the Oldman River? The next issue is water availability. It's an issue in southern Alberta each and every year. Why introduce coal mines that are huge users of water? And the last thing is the coal company, like all coal companies, has not responded to questions for 8 months. We interviewed Atrim 4 years ago, same issue. They had no answers for how they would control contamination and pollution. Neither does Northback, and they're not going to spend anywhere near the money that Teck has spent in BC to try and resolve the problem. Rest assured, they're here for a quick buck, in my opinion. Okay. So, the type of mining. On December the 20th, Brian Jean said it was going to be an open pit mine, under questioning from the media. But on January the 25th, Premier Danielle Smith said it wasn't going to be an open pit mine. And today she surprised everybody and said in Medicine Hat it was going to be in-ground tunnel mining, which is still going to create pollution. So there's no clarity from the government among the minister and the premier as to what type of mining's going ahead, and Northback's not answering any questions either. It probably is going to be open pit mining. Many people don't know that the Grassy Mountain site that they're proposing to develop is 8 times the size of the original Grassy Mountain site. It's huge. There's no way to control selenium leakage and no way to control wind-blown coal dust in our Chinook winds. Does anyone believe they can do that? No, I don't. And nobody in this room who's lived in this area for long knows that can be controlled. Reliance on the Alberta Energy Regulator. Well, the Environment Minister says we should rely on the Alberta Energy Regulator. On January the 6th, there was an article in the Globe and Mail saying they actually investigate 3% of the cases where contamination is happening. How effective are they? Well, just last week, they fined a coal company a total of $9,000 for polluting the waters. What kind of a deterrent is that? They're an industry-funded body. Who has confidence that they're going to make the right decisions and hold the coal company to account? But we say, as the Water for Food group, relying on the Alberta Energy Regulator in the first place is a mistake. By the time you identify that pollution has occurred, it's too late. And our own government studies say it takes 20 to 30 years to recover once a mine pollutes the river. So, the best thing to do is not to allow the mine in the first place. Will the Alberta Energy Regulator do that? Probably not. Their decision's coming in a few weeks. Next, the coal consultation process. Well, on December the 20th, Minister Brian Jean said he was going to only consult with the industry. In other words, the coal industry. They weren't even here 10 years ago. How did Albertans lose the right to consult on a new coal policy, and how did the coal industry get the right and usurp our rights? I won't take away the Indigenous perspective, but certainly there's no mention of inclusion of Indigenous rights in the consultation process either. Next, decisions and agreements are being made unilaterally. The minister is constantly changing the decisions, and the most amazing one was after the court decision where the joint federal and provincial panel turned down Grassy Mountain, and the company appealed it in the courts 3 times and lost every time. The company went on to the government website and changed the designation of the project to cancelled. Then the minister unilaterally has changed it to an advanced project, without consultation with Albertans, without explanation as to why. There was a detailed reason why the joint panel refused to the Grassy Mountain project. They said that the risks didn't justify the benefits, and basically the company's claims were not credible. So basically, the business case doesn't make sense. The government and the company are not respecting the court decisions. Albertans are not being consulted. Nobody's responding. I'm challenging Nathan Newdorf, the representative for Lethbridge, to a public debate. City Council has said no, 9-0, reaffirming for the 4th time we do not want a coal mine. Okay? The people, I don't think, want a coal mine either, but Nathan Newdorf is supporting it. Okay? The Premier is ultimately responsible for the statements of her ministers and for the position on this mine. My final closing argument is I'm going to ask Premier Smith, Daniel Smith, to resign. This issue is just as important as the health issue, and the minister is not answering questions to Albertans. She doesn't have a mandate to do what she's doing, and we need to have a full public inquiry as to what happened behind closed doors after the court decisions were made. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I should have mentioned at the beginning that we did have and asked representatives from the coal industry and from the Crowsnest community to be on this panel, and they declined. So you know that. Okay, Mandy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mandy Olsgaard. I'm a toxicologist and health risk assessor. I'm the former senior toxicologist of the Alberta Energy Regulator, and I left that role in 2017, and I'm an independent consultant. Industry can hire me to do health risk assessments for them, communities. The majority of my work is with Indigenous communities in the oil sands. So I don't specifically have a position on coal mining, but I can speak to the scientific evidence I've reviewed and the air dispersion modeling and human health and livestock health risk assessment I did on behalf of the Pekisko group. So that very much speaks to what the larger, so when the policy was rescinded in 2020, there was a huge undertaking. The government initiated it under Minister Sonia Savage, and a coal policy panel was struck. Bill Trafford was on that, and many other members. And we did a lot of work back then. And after that work, and because of that, I did this study for Pekisko Group. So I can speak to maybe the air monitoring data that's available in this region, how that was relied on by Banga Mine at the time when they did the Grassy Mountain application. Do they actually understand the Chinook winds? Is there even air monitoring data in this region that could support their models? So if you have questions around that, I can provide scientific details and results of that study that's publicly available. I gave a presentation before at SACPA, and I did a case study of an actual coal mine that's operating in northern Alberta up by Grand Cache area, so in the McLeod, Cardinal Rivers area and the Lescar Creek. And I can speak to information the coal company was providing to the Alberta Energy Regulator, if there was any evidence that they were interpreting that and managing it, And I can speak to the effects that are being observed at coal mines in the north in Alberta right now, on duck populations, benthic invertebrates, Government of Alberta studies that exist today that I've reviewed, and I can present findings of those to help you all understand the scientific information available to you so you can make decisions. I've also done quite a bit of work lately in looking at selenium removal technologies, so the technologies that they're using in the Elk Valley. You may have heard SRF, saturated rock fill, the technology that Northback wants to use. I can speak to how much selenium that can remove, what the concentration of selenium looks like in that effluent. Same with active water treatment facilities, and put that in context of the different guidelines that we use to protect humans, livestock, waters for irrigation, aquatic life, and maybe provide you some understanding of the aquatic life are the most sensitive and how it's different for everything that uses water. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. So like I said, I don't specifically have a position. Oh, and I guess the last thing is that I was a technical expert that supported the Northback hearing that we just had final arguments on yesterday, and Gavin can speak to it much more eloquently and in depth, but I can speak to what it's like being a technical expert who's maybe not working for the industry proponent. So I was contracted by an intervener, not Northback, and what that looks like and how really scientists are pitted against each other. Scientific information is put up against each other, and we rely on the Alberta Energy Regulator to weigh that. People don't have expertise maybe in toxicology and health risk assessment. So I hope you have questions around those kinds of things, and I can direct you to studies that the Government of Alberta scientists have published, what's coming out of the Elk Valley, what we do and don't know about coal mining, but we don't have a Grassy Mountain Mine application in front of us, so it's tricky right now to propose what that would look like. So I think it's great that we have this varied panel that can provide more of their context from living in Lethbridge. I don't live down here, so thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, Gavin, it's yours.
Thank you. So my name is Gavin Fitch. I'm a lawyer in Calgary. I've had the great privilege to represent the Livingstone Landowners Group in its fight with coal in both the joint review panel proceeding back in 2020 and then more recently with the application that we just finished closing argument on yesterday. So I want to give you a bit of I guess a little talk about the regulatory framework for coal development in the Eastern Slopes. You may have heard about something called the coal policy. Dates back to 1976, the government of Peter Lougheed. It did one big thing, which was to essentially divide the province of Alberta and the Eastern Slopes in particular into 4 different categories for the purpose of potential coal exploration and development. So the first, category 1, is basically off limits totally, no exploration, no development, and that's like national parks, provincial parks, wilderness areas. So frankly, you couldn't drill for coal there anyways, but that's category 1. Category 2 is an area which, according to the policy, there could be limited exploration, so you're exploring for the coal by drilling holes, but development, commercial development, would not normally be considered using surface mining. So that's category 2, and that covers a lot of the Eastern Slopes. Category 3 was where you could basically get approval for both exploration and development, including surface or open pit mining. The last category, category 4, was sort of a catch-all. It was anywhere else. And for the purposes of this discussion, the government zoned old mining sites as category 4. So that includes Grassy Mountain and also Tent Mountain in the Crowsnest Pass. So that was 1976. Not much happened from a regulatory policy perspective until 2020 when I think it was the Victoria Day weekend, the government just out of the blue, announced that they were rescinding the coal policy. As I think you all know from the media and everything, this caused a huge outrage and uproar. And in February of 2021, they reversed course. The energy minister issued a ministerial order basically reinstating the 1976 coal policy. And there followed after that a number in 2021 and 2022, several other ministerial orders basically putting a pause on coal exploration and coal development in Category 2. So remember, that's a lot of land on the eastern slope, not in a national park, but still environmentally sensitive. And it's sort of, this period when the government was kind of backtracking from approving coal culminated in March of 2022 when the then Energy Minister Sonia Savage issued an order essentially suspending all approvals that had been granted for exploration on Category 2 and essentially directing the AER that you cannot accept any further applications. So fast forward to December 23 of last year, 2024, again, somewhat out of the blue, I would suggest the government, the now Energy Minister, Brian Jean, announces the Coal Industry Modernization Initiative. And it was sort of sold as, we're gonna not permit mountaintop removal mining, we're not gonna permit open pit coal mining in the eastern slopes, and any mining that does occur has to use mining technologies that will prevent selenium leaching. And one of them they talked about was high wall automated underground mining. Well, I mean, like everyone else these days, I know how to use Google, so I Googled high wall automated underground mining, and I can tell you that everything I have read tells me that it's not underground, it's surface. That's the high wall is when you dig a pit and you end up with a wall. So that's what high wall mining is. So I'm not sure about the minister's explanation there. So that was followed, that was December of 2024. That was followed by the Minister of Energy on January 16th of this year, rescinding all of those orders that had been issued in 2021 and 2022, sort of taking coal development off the table. So now it's kind of back on the table. So there's been a lot of moving parts, but I would say in terms of where are we actually today, where we are is the 1976 coal policy is back in effect, which isn't a terrible thing because, you know, it does say that for the most part, there won't be development on Category 2 lands, but this high wall mining thing makes me nervous. And Grassy Mountain is Category 4 land, so it's not affected. So where is Grassy Mountain at? As Mr. Spearman said, we had a big hearing in 2021, 29 days in front of a joint review panel. That was for the mine development. And in a 680-page report, it got turned down quite resoundingly, I would say. And the proponent tried to appeal all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. That didn't work. But what we've sort of discovered is at the same time, they quietly continued exploration. And in last year, they applied for more approval of more exploration holes. And so we just had a hearing in January, and we just did final argument yesterday. And the only other thing I'll say is that when the government in 2021 and 2022 sort of was in its no coal mining phase, if I could put it that way, a number of companies which had taken out leases and started exploration after the policy had been rescinded in 2020, they sued the government, claiming billions of dollars in damages. And this made the news in February of this year when the Alberta Court of Appeal ruled that the former Energy Minister, Sonia Savage, will have to actually testify, which I'm sure she's really not looking forward to. And my understanding is these actions are going to trial in April of this year, and I would suggest that the Government of Alberta is highly motivated to ensure they do not go to trial and my suspicion is that they are currently negotiating to try to settle those actions so that they never see the light of day. So anyways, I'm over time. My
Thank you.
apologies.
Thank you. Okay, Elliot.
Okay, niks ook waaks. Ik heb genaakt om het simpelboa, koi. Still a go makoyo kinni. I just said in my Blackfoot language, hello friends and relatives. Happy to see you tonight. I said my Blackfoot name, which translates as wolf caller. My English name is Elliot Fox. I've born and raised on the Gannau, or the Blood Reserve, part of the Blood Tribe. And just recently elected to Blood Tribe Council. So we're going into our third month. So I'm here representing our council. I just want to make it clear. Well, firstly, I guess I think a lot of the audience here knows the Blood Tribe, Gannau, are members of the Blackfoot Confederacy. So there's 3 member tribes in Alberta, or what's now Alberta. Siksika, which is east of Calgary, Bighorn. It's west of here between Fort Macleod and Pincher Creek. And of course, there's the Blood Tribe southwest of here. And we've got our Blackfeet brothers and sisters in northern Montana. So that's the Blackfoot Confederacy. We've been here for a long time. Archaeological record is evidence of that. So I just want to make it very clear that I do not speak for the Blackfoot Confederacy. I speak for the Blood Tribe. Just some quick background. I'm a graduate of Lethbridge College, 1994. Renewable Resource Management and Environmental Science. I've spent the past 30 years working in southern Alberta in land management and natural resource conservation. Spent a lot of time in the water in the southern Alberta rivers. We're just wrapping up the 6th year of native trout project with the Blackfoot Confederacy Tribal Council, where we've been assessing native trout populations initially in the Bow and the Oldman, and just recently narrowed our study area to the St. Mary and the Belly, the Oldman down there. A couple of highlights of our findings were we discovered 2 new populations of West Slope cutthroat trout in our research. One was ironically below Cabin Ridge in a small tributary called Shale Creek. We discovered a new West Slope cutthroat trout population neither government was aware of. We also discovered a new cutthroat population in Callum Creek, which drains east out of the Rocky Mountains and along the Highway 22 and into the Oldman. So I guess just having said that, there's still, these trout are listed as endangered, threatened on the endangered species list. Bull trout and West Slope cutthroat trout, they're the native trout. So they're still there, but their populations have declined over the past probably 50 years or longer. Although they're still there, they're very resilient. They're an indicator species. So if they're still there, it indicates that we have, pretty clean water, because that's what they need to live in. Where am I? So we're part of the Blackfoot Treaty Region, or Treaty 7. I'm just going to read a statement. So we had our recent election for Blood Tribe leadership just in late November. So so we're 3 months in, like I said, but I just want to read a statement from our new leadership. So on January 28th, 2025, Chief Travis Plaited Hair wrote to Premier Smith to communicate Kainai's position. So Kainai's Chief and Council have a duty to protect our nation's treaty rights, lands and waters, and Blackfoot way of life. We wish to be very clear that Kainai opposes any new coal development in the eastern slopes of the Blackfoot Treaty Region, and we will take all steps necessary against new coal mines, particularly in light of Alberta's complete disregard for our treaty rights. Ganow remains committed to opposing all new coal development in the eastern slopes and especially in the headwaters of the Oldman River in the Crowsnest Pass. Chief and Council are in the process of reviewing Ganow's options and strategy with our legal counsel and potential coordination with the other Blackfoot nations in opposition to new coal development. We will continue to keep you updated on developments regarding the coal mining issue. So and I'm really glad there's groups like are here in the audience that are coming together to oppose what we all know. There's clear evidence. We've heard from a toxicologist, from a lawyer, from Chris, about, it's just not the right thing to do. So we're committed to, our opposition. We've been here, like I say, for a long time. We look at the Elk River experience and the coal mining that's still going on there. And there's, the selenium contamination is going to be there for as long as we're here and probably our children and our grandchildren. I don't know if Danielle Smith has children or grandchildren or Brian Jean or where they live, but if they, they're obviously pretty short-sighted. It's all about the almighty dollar. They're disrespecting their descendants, their children and their grandchildren by, overlooking this all. And this Australian billionaire that's, I don't know if she's ever been here. It's not it's all about the almighty dollar. So I've got probably 10 seconds left. But I just want to thank everybody and want to just reiterate the Blood Tribe is committed, and we're going to continue working through the courts also to oppose any kind of new coal mines in southern Alberta. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you. So I think we have a pretty good indication and clarity around the position of each of our panelists. I'm going to ask the first question. The other thing we should have done when we gave instructions on writing out the questions is to write so it's legible. But in any event, I will do my best. And then Bev and Craig are going to be there with the microphones. Where are you? Okay, so anyway, you can line up and they will get you with the microphone. So I'm going to read the first question. And the first question, I think, Gavin, you can start on this one. The lawsuit by the coal companies, you've already spoken about that. The lawsuit by the coal companies against the Alberta government, what is its status at this point? And what can we do legally to oppose the mine?
I'll start by being a careful lawyer and providing a caveat that I'm not involved in that litigation, so I don't have any firsthand knowledge. But I do know, I have seen the statement of claim, I've seen the government statement of defense. So basically, the claim is that when the government put a moratorium on any exploration and development, that companies that had acquired mineral rights, started exploring and all of that, they then essentially lost the ability to continue to try to develop a mine. They're arguing that their rights were effectively expropriated. It's called de facto expropriation or a constructive taking. There's 4 different lawsuits. I think they've been consolidated into a single proceeding. You may have read, a figure of about $15 or $16 billion being the total damages. That's calculated on the basis of if we had got an approval, developed the mine, and mined for the full 25 years, that's how much money we would have made. So it's the absolute highest dollar figure they could have possibly argued. My strong suspicion is that even if they were successful, if it goes to trial and they were successful, the damages would be probably significantly less than that. As to where it's at, I don't know much more than what you've probably read in the press. I did read the Alberta Court of Appeal decision, the one ordering Sonia Savage to testify. My understanding is it's supposed to, there's supposed to be a trial starting on April 25th. As to what you could do, I mean, realistically, there's nothing any individual citizen of the province of Alberta can do to influence the outcome of the case. It's you know, it's before the courts, as the old saying goes. So yeah, there's nothing we can do to that's too far along now for anyone to do anything about. Like I said, I'm strongly of the view it's never going to actually proceed the trial, but you never know.
Okay, Chris, you want to take 30 seconds?
I need more than that. Anyway, there are two clauses in the Minerals Act, which I think Gavin has referred to, which limit the amount of funds that could be paid out. Secondly, you should be very concerned if the Alberta government settles, just to keep themselves from testifying. If they pay out tax dollar money without explaining why they settled, I think Alberta taxpayers deserve an answer as to why that happened. They've done it before in other countries. They've expropriated large amounts of cash, and there's speculation that some of these companies aren't interested in coal mining. They're actually interested in mining cash from the Alberta government and Alberta taxpayers. So you should be opposed to a settlement.
Thank you. I should have mentioned to line up to ask your questions, Bev, right there. So come down there, and that's where you can ask your questions. In the meantime, I'll ask one more question, and that's, Mandy, could you expand a little bit on what are the health effects of the possible contaminants from this mine?
Yeah, so there's different contaminants and different pathways. And so I think Gavin made a great point that I just want to reiterate. I don't really care what type of mine you have, high wall, open pit, mountaintop. If it's above ground, there are certain sources of contaminants and they move through certain pathways. If it's below ground, there's different sources and different pathways. So for everyone in the audience, I wouldn't get too caught up in the terms that are being thrown around. It's almost to try and confuse so that you don't ask questions. Just ask if it's above or below. If it's above, there is going to be a significant source of particulate matter from coal mine dusts. So Elk Valley are all above ground, and there are significant issues with particulate matter. We see it down in West Virginia and the mines there, and in Australia. Any community that lives in proximity, so that's usually within 20, 30 kilometers of an open pit coal mine or multiple mines, there are adverse effects in those communities from exposure to particulate matter. And that's not a chemical per se, but particulate matter that gets so small, gets down deep in your lung, that's associated with early onset mortality and cardiovascular disease. And we control particulate matter the same way that we control carcinogens in the environment. There's no safe level of exposure. So if it's above ground, you're going to have coal mine dusts, and that's a significant risk to community health. Then there's the selenium toxicity issue. There's selenium, there's other compounds that change in the water and form calcite that actually can turn the cobbles in these creeks that the species we were talking about, the trout, they need those, but it makes it like a cement bottom, so they can't actually, reproduce properly. There's nitrates. People are well aware of these chemicals. They're associated with blue baby syndrome in humans. They also affect aquatic species. So those are kind of the three biggies maybe from effluents from coal mines, but there's a lot of different metals and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And I guess just the one thing I want to say about selenium, because we get really concerned, selenium causes different toxicity depending on if you're a mammal or a bird or a fish or an aquatic invertebrate. So ask those questions. I am of the view as a toxicologist, if you can remove enough selenium that you can protect aquatic life, so fish and invertebrates, you will likely protect all other downstream uses. So that means you have to get those selenium levels down to 1 or 2 micrograms per liter, and then you should be protecting that ecosystem for irrigators, agriculture, livestock, human drinking water sources. That's just the scientific numbers. Perception is different. And I'll provide an example. In the oil sands region, there was a commercial fishery at one time in Fort Chipewyan. No one has ever said anything large or release or spill has come from the oil sands. In the 90s, without warning, without any letters and any rationale, the commercial fishery was closed. We don't know what information the government had. We don't know if it was perception of the people buying trout from that commercial fishery, but it was closed overnight. So I might say this about numbers, and it's a numbers game with selenium. If you have huge agri-food industries and they get wind that you have coal mines upriver, I don't know what that would do from a perception perspective. So you have to be looking at it from almost like the social and the toxicological. Sorry, I went on a bit long, but.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question.
This is kind of a follow-up question on that. What does selenium do to the human body? What does it do to cattle? And what does it do to growing plants like wheat?
Good question, thank you. So we all need selenium, right? If you're taking vitamins in the morning, there's likely some selenium in there. Every biological system needs a certain amount of selenium. It's a trace element, it's a micronutrient. So we need that to keep our cells functioning properly. When there's too much of it in humans, you can start to see effects on like nails, your hair. It's really kind of like a dermal effector, so that's usually what happens. There are quite minimal effects in humans from selenium toxicity. In cattle, though, you will see it in like malformed hooves and things like that, and if it gets high enough, it will affect reproduction. You will see you could observe decreased reproduction rates, which is pretty important to a rancher that's trying to have a ranching operation if your cows aren't having calves every year. So you'll start to see those effects, but you'll see like effects on hooves and things first. So there's telltale signs. Vegetation, if the vegetation, so the plants that livestock are eating, if they accumulate selenium to too high of a level, they could be becoming toxic to the things eating them, but you'll see like browning of leaves. You'll see that the plants start to die off. You've probably all seen kind of unhealthy plant growth or areas. It would look the same. Plants kind of, you'd have less of them. They're scrawny. They have browning leaves, that type of thing. There's no telltale selenium toxicity sign, I'd say, in vegetation. In aquatic biota and fish, very distinctive, but so you see the curvature of the spine. Fish will die early because they didn't develop properly. And so over time, you start to see populations decrease and collapse. So that's why selenium is much more toxic to aquatic invertebrates. You'll see those effects at the population level. But interestingly, that was brought to my attention. Selenium toxicity in fish looks very similar to whirling disease. So if you're not actually testing fish that you catch that you suspect have whirling disease, if you're not testing the tissues for selenium concentrations, tissue residues, there could actually be cases where maybe it was selenium, could be whirling. You can distinguish through those through testing. So, but it would look very similar, I think. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. No, please come up and ask questions. We want to hear from you folks in the audience. This question, I'll throw it out. Maybe, Chris, you can tackle this one if you can, if not someone else. If the mine proceeds, how much water will it need on a monthly or annual basis?
I'm not sure of the actual quantity, so I'm not going to speculate, but I'm told it's huge to wash the coal, wash the rocks before shipment. So if somebody else knows the specific answer to that, I see Lord Fitch is at the mic. He may know that answer. But
I won't say anything about how much water, but like in the words of Dr. Brad Spellfox, coal is a thirsty business. So I don't know, but I just want to be clear, there is no mine application in front of you. So just, it's a good thing. I think that sometimes when industry hears things like that, they're like, see, there's no coal mine. This is just for exploration. This is just for a couple holes. It's important that we're using the right language too, so they can't come after people asking questions for the wrong reasons. So there is currently no coal mine application. Doesn't mean there couldn't be one in the very near future, but these are for exploration permits and stuff. I don't know if you guys know about water.
I can't remember, at the JRP hearing, all of that information was before the panel. I don't recall. Just to Mandy's last point, one of the things that we learned in the hearing in January is that since Northback, as they're now called, acquired the Grassy Mountain property in 2013, they have drilled 199 exploration holes and have reclaimed none. Now they say we have functionally reclaimed 30 of the 199. Functionally reclaimed meaning they've done all the work, they just haven't bothered to file the paperwork, with the Government of Alberta. That's all on Crown land, and they've got 164 holes that they've drilled on private land, mainly their own land, and the law says you have to reclaim whether it's public or private, but the reality is they're not reclaiming wells, and the only ones that they're reclaiming are the ones they know they absolutely have to, because the government will go after them, and the reason the government will go after them is because people like you are hounding the government to go after them. So I think that's what's going on. So, one of the big debates we had at the hearing was, Northback said, these are just, it's a minor exploration program. We're just drilling a few holes. Like, what's the big deal? From an environmental perspective, there's no big deal. But again, when you put it in perspective, 199 holes over the last 11 years, that's a lot. And there's access roads and all that stuff. So exploration does have an impact on the land. Obviously not as much of an impact as an open pit mine, but it does. And people, the government says you have to reclaim, and it doesn't seem, based on the evidence that I heard, like that's actually happening.
Okay. Next question.
The quick answer to the volume of water, as Benga estimated it for the first go-around, was somewhere between 600 to 800,000 cubic meters of water per year to wash coal. Mandy, you've touched on the selenium issue, and I know selenium is one of those issues that's high on people's minds, but there isn't a great deal of understanding, and the narratives seem to run both ways. Could you take us through selenium treatments as you understand them, and whether or not those selenium treatments have actually been effective at reducing selenium contamination in water down to the prescribed thresholds to keep aquatic life and fish alive? And maybe if you could also touch on bioaccumulation of selenium.
Yeah, so we're going to play a bit of a numbers game. There's not too many, and that's why I think everyone can understand this. So the Alberta Surface Water Quality Guidelines for the protection of aquatic life. We have a lot of different guidelines. You protect aquatic life, you protect waters for irrigation, you protect water for a drinking water source. The Aquatic Life Guideline is the lowest. So the alert limit, you're going to start getting concerned, you're going to start watching the system, is 1. The guideline is 2 micrograms per liter, so parts per billion. So 1 and 2 micrograms per liter is what you want selenium concentrations to be below in water. So the saturated rock fill, so if you have all that waste rock, which we know is one of the main sources of selenium, that's the historical contamination at a lot of lakes. If you kind of keep that underwater, you keep selenium in a oxidation state where it's not bioavailable. Gets a little more complicated, but we won't go there just yet. So, saturated rock fill. This is one of the best technologies they're proposing. Elk Valley has a commercial scale saturated rock fill, and they have to monitor that, and they have Teck, Glencoe now. They have to monitor that weekly, monthly, and they have to report it into the British Columbia government. So I pulled those reports, and the average concentration for 2022, the average, so 50th percentile, 50% of the points are above that, the average is 3 micrograms per liter, the best it can do. The maximum reported that year was 8 micrograms per liter. So we're 3 to 8 times, right? Use the limit or use the guideline. So 1 to 2 is where you want to be. 3 is where they get about 50% of the year. 8 is their maximum. So you can see it's above. That treatment's not getting there. That is really what Northback is relying on. That's their, we got the solution, we got the fix. So there's the numbers you guys have. Active water treatment, municipal water treatment, anything we drink, they have that on the Westline Creek. Same system. That's what they pump billions of dollars into. The federal government gave them years to figure this out. They didn't find them right away. Ultimately, that active water treatment, the average, so again, that 50%, 11 micrograms per liter. That's an average, maximum, about 17, 18. So it's quite a bit higher than what you need to protect aquatic life. Was there another part to that? Oh, bioaccumulation. So selenium is a bioaccumulative substance. We have to manage those differently. So dilution isn't actually happening with bioaccumulative substances. They are just partitioning to different parts of the environment. They're absorbing to sediments. Whatever lives in a sediment or eats a sediment when it's trying to get its food, they're going to bioaccumulate selenium from sediments. It accumulates in plants. That's why on agricultural lands you have to, maybe you're supplementing with selenium, but maybe you have hyperaccumulating plants and high selenium in your soil. And ranchers are chemists at this. They have to understand their soil, their plants, how much their cattle are eating. It's because they're bioaccumulative substances. So when people are saying they're treating it through wetlands or slowly releasing it at low levels, selenium's actually not diluting out. It's just going somewhere else in the ecosystem it's being released to. Eggs of birds, it's just going anywhere it can find. That's not the chemical term for it, but that's the fate and transport of selenium.
Okay, thank you. Next question, please.
Hello. We spent a lot of time talking about the potential negative impacts for the coal mining here in southern Alberta. I do have to wonder, though, given that the Oldman River watershed ultimately flows into the Saskatchewan River and joins a larger network of river that ultimately ends in Hudson's Bay, is there any risk to our neighbors in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, or even looking south down to Montana that the pollution that's going to be unleashed here might not stay here?
Sorry, I'm talking a lot, but yeah, so it is well documented that the Elk Valley selenium releases and contamination moved hundreds of kilometers downstream is detected in Montana in the Kootenai River system. So I can't specifically say if it would happen. I don't know if we'll have the level of development as the Elk Valley, but you basically have a case study right next door that says if you have a high magnitude of development, selenium's being released at the levels we know it is. We don't know historically, it was likely much higher, but it will move down systems. Is it going to get out Hudson Bay? That's pretty far. There's a lot that happens in between, but right, so dissolved selenium, partitioning, sediments, it did move far enough that it went into Montana, so it's a risk. It would have to be accounted for in modeling. So if you ever saw a mine application, they do have to do cumulative, it's called the plan development scenario. Anyone that has indicated they might have a mine or has an application in, so Northback in this case, they would have to have a planned development scenario that would have all those mines. But again, they do the modeling. They tell the regulator what they think. So it's, I don't know if that helps. I don't know if anyone else wants to talk.
I'm really not going to comment on the science things, but I did include some packages that people can get outside the door, which include the scientific reports that Water for Food got from the four reports from the Alberta government scientists, 2 independent reports, and of course we've had 3 different professional biologists testify at the Alberta Energy Regulator hearings. So that information is all contained in the packages, and everything that I've talked about is in those packages. So if you're lucky enough to get some copies, all those arguments are documented, and you can take them home and read them, and then ask questions after the session.
Okay, thank you. Next question, please.
Thanks. My question is for Mr. Fitch. I've heard, I think, in the press from the Premier and from Mr. Jean and the government that one of the main reasons that they want to open up the slopes for mining in the face of the environmental threats and in the face of the minuscule financial impact, that the reason for that is for to prevent the lawsuit, right? And so I've heard speculation from people that this is because not only the money, but in the process of the lawsuit, a lot of the backroom dealings and communications would come out. Is that paranoid or is that realistic? And if it is realistic, like from your in your legal opinion, what kinds of things could come out in a process like that?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I think it was in January when the ministerial order was issued, rescinding the previous orders that had put a pause on development in the Eastern Slopes. The Premier, as his or her way, waxed eloquently, and she mentioned the litigation. And I think she said something to the effect of wanting to protect the Alberta taxpayer. So she, not me, not you, seemed to draw a pretty direct line between opening, the potential for coal development again to the lawsuits. And of course, there is a line, right? Because the as we lawyers would say, the cause of action in the lawsuits is we had rights to explore for and hopefully develop and profit from coal mines. You took them away, so we're suing you for damages. And now the government's saying, oh, but we've given them back, right? So presumably one would surmise, the hope is that by essentially taking us back to where we were in the first place, so the coal policy, that kind of undercuts the claim. Now, if I were acting for the coal companies, I'd say, well, we still have a bunch of damages. We invested a bunch of money, and we had to pay our lawyers a bunch of money, and this and that. But the size of the claim shrinks dramatically. As for, what might come out in a trial, I mean, like everyone else, I've heard all sorts of theories and rumors. I wouldn't be surprised, let's put it that way, if, there was evidence that the government is concerned about in terms of, companies like Hancock and others essentially being induced to come and invest in Alberta by the government, and then being told, no, sorry, we've changed our mind. So who knows? Are there incriminating texts, emails? I mean, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're a bit worried about it.
Minister Jean mentioned before Christmas that there were contractual obligations between Alberta and the coal companies that a lot of us aren't aware of. Do you know about that?
No, I think the energy, so Brian Jean said that. I think he later tried to clarify what he meant. And I think what he was referring to is the leases. So the Government of Alberta, issued coal leases, Crown coal leases to companies. We issued exploration permits on the strength of those leases and those permits. Companies spent a bunch of money. So I think that's what he was referring to. I don't think there was any actual contract between the government and the coal companies that they could mine. That would be quite astonishing. And I think, Corb, maybe I didn't answer quite all of your question. I mean, if there were, hypothetically speaking, if there were documents, emails, et cetera, that suggested that companies had been induced to come to Alberta to invest, blah, 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 it strikes me those would be pretty relevant documents, and so therefore they would be admissible, at trial. And so there may be some fear or sensitivity on the government's part about what, trials are public. So court reporters could, media and press could attend, and they might very well be worried. I don't know.
Okay, Chris, you wanted to say something?
In our package of information, we documented an article from a gentleman by, I think it's B. McKay of the St. Albert Gazette, who he provides a list of all the consultations between the coal companies and the Alberta governments behind the scenes, the lobbying efforts going back multiple years, that indicate an ongoing relationship. I don't know what was said, but he's and the list of consultations is impressive, and it's available in some of the packages outside.
Thank you. Next question.
My name is Grant Harrington. I've been a member of this city for the last 50 years, and I've been a businessman here, started 5 different companies, all incorporated in Alberta, all selling through Western Canada. And I've got one question in particular that I'm concerned about, and there's another Australian firm called BHP Mining that is putting the largest mine in the world, potash mine in Saskatchewan. They're investing $18 billion to do it. It has a machine that works only underground. There are no people working underground. All the granulate that they get is conveyed to the surface, it's processed, it's looked after, and any sludge that remains goes back into the mine. They've managed to manage it properly, get it through the Saskatchewan government, and put a pile of money into this thing. I'm just wondering why that whole thing can't be worked with our, what we used to call black gold, and what Saskatchewan calls now pink gold. Why can't it be done right with the technology that's out there? Like, I have grandchildren here and I'm concerned about them, just like Mr. Fox. But you've got to look at the other side of the equation. There may be a way to do this properly. And even with the Blood Tribe, maybe the Blood Tribe can monitor it. Maybe they can have somebody or some group put into place to make sure none of this stuff we're worried about, like the blowing particles, the selenium, why can't it be looked after now? With the technology we have, coming from all around the world, and this time of our life, when we got to worry about a orange-colored hair across the border, that we may need more investment in Alberta and more power to be able to do what we want to in Alberta without interference. I think we should look at it. So don't close your minds, everybody. Think about what can happen if the investment happened, and if it was done right, and if our government looked after it properly. Thank you.
Who would you like to answer the question, or you?
Good question. Probably Mr. Spearman.
Good point. My question would be, are these companies prepared to invest that kind of money? So in terms of controlling selenium, for example, Teck spent over $1 billion trying to solve the problem. Do you believe that Northback will spend that kind of money? That's an open question. When City Council interviewed Atrium Coal 4 years ago, they were basically a penny stock. We asked them, did they have laboratories? No, they didn't. Did they consult with any other company that had laboratories? No, they didn't. Were they working on the problem? Yes. Who were you working with? They didn't have an answer. My response is, yes, responsible companies might invest in technology. I've been asking questions to Northback for 8 months and have yet to get a single answer. They have not been able to say, we're going to use new technology and this is what it is. So in the absence of that kind of information from Northback, I don't believe anything they say.
The only thing I would add to that is, again, I'm a lawyer, not a hard rock mining engineer or coal mining engineer for that matter. But when companies make mine applications, they have to file thousands of pages of studies and reports and documents. And the Joint Review Panel, or the AER, has to consider whether the project is in the public interest, having regard for economic, social, and environmental aspects. So when you have a hearing on a coal mine development, you actually do get into economics. And I think one of the problems or one of the issues is that it's probably not economic to mine for coal in the eastern slopes other than through surface mining. Now, I know there are some, in Grand Cache area, there are still some working underground mines, but of course underground mining also has safety issues and all of that. So my feeling though is that if underground mines were economic, we'd probably see applications for underground mines. I just think that everything I have sort of observed, I guess, being acting for the Livingstone Landowner Group in this thing is that to make it pay, to make the economics work, it's got to be surface mining. And then you get into this whole suite of issues and concerns, selenium and other things.
Yeah, I'll just really quickly, when I work with the Alberta Energy Regulator, and since I sit on a lot of different working groups, and I'm, again, not an engineer, but we do best available technology, economically achievable assessments. And so every group I sit on, we remove the EA. If it's not economic, let's figure out what the best available technology is, write that report, and then industry can do their own economics evaluation. And so sitting on several of those and having actually done an environmental assessment of an area around Hinton for a coal mine, it was not economically feasible to have below ground surface mining. They wouldn't have made enough profit and go ahead. So that's an incredible story. If that BHP was willing to put the technology in, it's astounding they didn't provide jobs. So that example you gave, I don't know how that would go across with the Crowsnest Pass if you're gonna automate everything. And that could be, it's just, they're very complex assessments to figure this out. And ultimately, companies are not there to make communities better, to throw Australia days, and they're doing that for a reason. They're there for their stakeholders, and we can't forget that at the end of the day, but that's why they're there. They're companies, they're corporations, they're not communities. And so I've never had an example where they said, yes, we're going to do the best technology and be as protective of the environment as we can, no matter the cost to our bottom line.
Okay, I'd like to make, thank you. I'd like to make a quick announcement. There will be a donation bucket floating around. Southminster Church has provided this facility to us this evening free of charge, and we think it would be appropriate to give them a little donation. Next question.
I'm Maria Fitzpatrick, and I live here in Lethbridge. Lethbridge is in the Palliser Triangle. And if you don't know, the Palliser Triangle is a drought area. So we have a limited amount of water that we get from runoff in the mountains. And if that runoff into the Oldman Watershed is going through the mine process, then I am worried about selenium and the levels that will be in our drinking water. We used to think that lead was safe. We used to think asbestos was safe. Neither are. So future science may prove that selenium isn't safe above 1 micron in a liter of water. So with the low amount of water that we get, certainly the amount of selenium in the water bioaccumulates. How much more is it bioaccumulating when you're in a drought area and we have a really limited amount of water? And how long will it be safe for my children, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren to live in this area, or any of us to live in this area if this goes forward? And the question can go to anybody.
No one's done the study, so it's a great question, and if you're not involved, you as a community, if Lethbridge is not one of the communities that a coal mine has identified as having concerns, you are likely not in their study area. Any of their predictive modeling would not answer your questions. You would only have information to the edge of their study boundaries. And I might hand this over to Elliot here, because with Indigenous communities and traditional territories being broad, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but so I would not expect you would see any data specific to Lethbridge or future generations or how it's going to accumulate in the system. The regional study area for the original Grassy mine was very limited for the mine that got denied. So you have to be banging down any mine proponent. It's not just Northback in the future if they do open the slopes, but they're probably not going to come to Lethbridge and ask you specifically. So that would be, it's a great question. It can be studied, it can be predicted. It's only as accurate as models are. It's predictive, but you have to be asking those questions to the people designing their environmental impact assessment, their health impact assessment, so.
So Mandy just asked if I've worked with industries that have considered our lands or our resources. Well, I'm really new to leadership, so I haven't had an opportunity yet to really delve into any kind of business agreements or those kinds of things. In terms of water monitoring, we're not actively monitoring water quality right now in terms of the Blood Tribe. With the Blackfoot Confederacy Native Trout Project, we were conducting eDNA water sampling. So that was limited to I guess fish DNA is what we would sort of screen out and try to identify what species of fish were in the tributaries we sampled. So no, we were not doing water quality monitoring, although, you know, it's a good question. Maybe we should go down that path and start doing that. Our brothers and sisters from the Blackfeet have air quality monitoring stations around the reservation. So they change those filters every day, so they know what's coming through their airshed. So, you know, maybe we should start doing the same. Yeah, but good question. So I better get moving here and start to bring up those kinds of important issues. But, you know, like Mandy had talked about, without, you know, specific daily or weekly or monthly water quality monitoring, there's evidence in some of the species in the aquatic ecosystem that evidence is from the water quality. So I know there's benthic invertebrate the benthic invertebrates are a good indicator. I'm not familiar with what the health of those macro invertebrates are to indicate any kind of selenium or anything like that. Those kinds of scientific methods, I guess, are out there. So I guess we should start trying, like I said, to maybe explore those kinds of avenues with our partners. And for those of you who aren't aware, the Blood Reserve is just southwest of here. So we're the largest geographical Indian reserve in Canada. We're surrounded, our boundaries, the west boundary is the Belly River, the north boundary is the Oldman, and the east boundary is the St. Mary. The south boundary is pretty well perpendicular, to Highway 5 west of Cardston. So that's our reserve. So we're surrounded by water. And so, definitely we're impacted, and we're upstream of Lethbridge. So only on the north end of the Blood Reserve, where the Oldman River flows, would be impacted by selenium. So the city of Lethbridge would probably feel the impacts more than the Blood Reserve in terms of water quality, drinking water, livestock, those kinds of things. We've got very few residents along the Oldman at the north end of the reserve. Anyway, so hopefully that helps. Thank you.
Okay, Chris?
I just want to add, the reason why we became concerned when I was the mayor of the city of Lethbridge was when we interviewed Atrim, we asked the city engineer, the director of wastewater and water processing, if there was excess selenium in the Oldman River, was there technology to remove it? And the answer was no. That's still true today. So we go back to the fact that this is only an exploratory drilling application by Northback. But if that exploratory application is successful, they will want to do their proposed open pit mines, the massive size. Okay, so then look at the liability that we will face if we've encouraged them to continue. The answer is just say no now.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to read one of the questions that have been asked previously. If the mine proceeds, is there any information as to the risk of another slide at Turtle Mountain?
Again, there's no mine application. No mine yet. So again, all the information we have was Banga's EIA, their predictive modeling for the mine that was denied by the regulator, and I'm not a geotechnical engineer, so do you remember from the hearing?
What I remember from the hearing is they did do some sort of a geotechnical study to look at the risk of the mine development essentially triggering like seismic sort of events that could cause a slide, and the risk was very, very low. It really wasn't a big issue at the hearing.
Okay, thank you. Next question, please.
Hello. My question, and I think this is reflected in a lot of people, is that there's another level of government involved in this that we're not talking about very often right now, and that's our federal government. Now, the Joint Review Panel turned this mine down, and there's not a mine. But they've already turned down a coal mine because the oversight of federal is fisheries and water, as far as I understand it. Now, I've also read that part of the joint review, the federal part, was turned down, was taken to the Supreme Court because they did not consult with Piikani or Stoney Nakoda, who wanted some revenue from those mines. So I guess my question is probably for Mr. Fox and Mr. Fitch. When we go forward, because this is probably going to go back to the federal government, why can't we stand on the legality of that? Why can't we stand on a joint review that's already been done? Why does this keep opening up? And I know this is confusing around the province.
Well, I had this debate with Northback yesterday and in January, and they say, and look, there is truth to what they say, that what the Joint Review Panel did was it turned down a specific application. They say that they read the JRP report, they've taken account of the deficiencies that the JRP found, and they're going to redesign their mine and submit a new application, and they're entitled to do that, and it's true. That's all true. With respect to the role of the federal government, you know, there has been a change since Grassy 1, if I could call it that, in that the government, Grassy Mountain, the JRP was under the old Canadian Environmental Assessment Act that was passed in 2012. That was repealed by the Liberals in 2015. The Impact Assessment Act was enacted. That's been partially struck down by the Supreme Court of Canada. The government has now amended the act. So the jurisdiction of the federal government is a bit up in the air in my mind, but I'm pretty sure they would still, I'm pretty sure they still have jurisdiction because of the West Slope cutthroat trout, so their jurisdiction is under federally listed aquatic species, so listed as being threatened. And in terms of what went up to the Supreme Court of Canada, the Stoney and the Pecani, they were supporting, they had done, I don't know if they had impact benefit agreements or what, but they're certainly supporting Northback now, and I'm trying to remember what happened in Benga. I think they initially opposed the project, then they entered into some kind of deal or agreement with the company. They didn't really take part in the hearing because of that. Then the project got turned down, and so they were the appellants, right? They were trying, along with Benga, to get the JRP decision overturned, and what the Pecani and the Stoneys were arguing was, we will lose the benefit of the agreement that we have entered into with Benga. So, anyways, I don't know if you want to say anything, Elliot, about the role of First Nations in these sorts of reviews, or.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate again, I don't speak for those other Indigenous communities. But having some knowledge of water and fish jurisdiction, so obviously from the 1930 Natural Resource Transfer Agreement, where the federal government transferred various natural resources that were under federal jurisdiction prior to the NRTA without consulting First Nations. So, that's one avenue that we can take to challenge the federal government on that. They didn't consult us where they had treaty obligations they had entered into with specifically us being the Blood Tribe and other Indigenous communities. No consultation, transferred our rights, which they had obligations to under the treaty. So that would be, I've often asked about that. Now that I'm in leadership, I'm going to ask that more. Let's take them to task, because and so the provinces, the western provinces, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, assume jurisdiction of water, wildlife, oil and gas, minerals. The feds still have jurisdiction of fish. But the province is an ex officio. They have authority to regulate fishing in Alberta. So that's one avenue I suppose we can take. Yeah, I don't want to tease you, but I just want to say that keep your ears open and your eyes open in the next week or two. We just approved a resolution on Monday with our council, and it's some legal issues I cannot mention right now. Or yeah, so we'll see where that goes. But again, yeah, we will continue to pressure the federal government. That's who our treaty relationship is with. Because of some of the jurisdictional transfers of some of those areas that were formerly federal, it's now at the province, and the province hasn't had a very good track record with First Nations in Alberta. And, across the country, some are doing better than others. So anyway, yeah, so I see one of my fellow councillors in the room. So Maria, take some notes, and we got to bring this back to council. Anyway, thank you. I'll end there. Thanks.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Hi. Hello. Hi, John Smith from Nanton, Alberta. My first question, I got two quick ones, is for Mr. Fox. Mandy asked a really great question there about whether you'd been doing any water monitoring along with your fish stuff, and it sounded like no. So I wanted to kind of expand on that and see if you knew of any opportunities where maybe you guys could, as an educational course through the Lethbridge, through college, provide some employment opportunities that way, plus we get an economic benefit. And I was wondering if there was any synergy with, the USC, the U of L, and our provincial and federal governments. My second question, then I'll step away, is just, we've talked a lot about water, Mandy, and I was wondering if you could expand on air particulate matter and how far it goes, just to kind of build on that, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll take a stab at the first question. Yeah, good question. With the Native Trout Project, part of our research was we assisted AEPA, Alberta Environment and Protected Areas. They gave us a whole bunch of leftover water temperature data loggers. So we installed those in various tributaries in the Bow River, around east of Banff, in the Ghost, Wyperus, all the way to the St. Mary. So we are assisting the Alberta government monitor water temperatures. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there is a really good opportunity. We've got some great post-secondary institutions right here in Lethbridge. We've got Red Crow College on the Blood Reserve. So I think there's some really good opportunities to take some of these suggestions and maybe expand our water, our scope of water monitoring on the Blood Reserve. I think, yeah, and we've had partners with the Blackfoot Confederacy Native Trout Project. That's primarily been funded by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Canada, under their Aboriginal Fund for Species at Risk. So there's an aquatic and there's a terrestrial component. We're in year 6 under the aquatic component. That's the primary funder of this. We've got partners with Alberta and AEPA, the Oldman Watershed Council, Cows and Fish, Freshwater Canada, used to be Trout Unlimited. So those have been some of our partners. But yeah, that's a really good question. So we should really go down that path and try to explore that. And like you say, partner, maybe employment, collect some really good data with those post-secondary institutions teaching us and making sure we're doing things right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read one more question. This question is for Chris. Oh, sorry. My apology.
That's okay. Yeah, so I'll just speak quickly to the air study that I did for the Pekisco group. And it's interesting because we didn't have access to any data. Pekisko Group was not proposing to have a coal mine, but we had the Grassy Mountain Mine application, and those are detailed enough that there was every piece of information that I required to do an air dispersion model using the same modeling software, CalPuff, that Banga did for their application. So the emission factors for the dust that would come out of the mine faces, for any stacks they would have on site, for any vehicles and the nitrogen oxides that come out. I just adopted their exact emission factors. So that's what's a little bit interesting about it when Northback's legal counsel comes at me. I actually just reproduced their study and we built it out for 8 potential mines. We just said, okay, probably doesn't always look like Grassy in those operations, but in lieu of anything else, we're just gonna make it about the same size. So you'll increase the emission factors or decrease them based on the footprint of the proposed mine that Dr. Stelfox had done in his study. So it was kind of a unique way and an approach. So when we did that, it was interesting because I had to look into Banga's air dispersion modeling, and we'll really quickly go through how air monitoring works. So you have winds in different directions at the surface. So you have kind of surface air monitoring, and then you have what's called upper air monitoring. And these two different wind streams move chemicals very differently. You've probably all seen huge stacks coming out of factories. Those are designed to be that high, so they take those big, puffy, pollutant clouds and they put them in the upper airstream. That's called an MM5 data set. Doesn't mean anything, but the province of Alberta gives us that data set. Nobody monitors that. No one has a meteorological station going up that high to tell you, but the province of Alberta does that for us. Then local monitoring is a responsibility under the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan. There's an air monitoring environmental framework. So anywhere within the SSRP, which is really important in this case, should have air monitoring stations. We couldn't find any in the Grassy area. They were using the Crowsnest Pass, the communities down south, for local air monitoring. You all live here. You know what the winds look like. The winds are substantially different between Lethbridge, between Blairmore, and then when you get up into the Pekisko area and the Gap and the winds coming over there, there was one air monitoring station at a fire station, a fire base they had up there, but it couldn't support air modeling. I couldn't actually use it. It's a gap in our report and a limitation. So I just wanted to speak to that quickly. So using the data that we had, that we know would be lower, a very low end estimate of the wind speeds, and maybe not even the correct directions. The model that I predicted, particulates and some of the gases that go higher, the particulates would get into the grazing leases that many of the ranchers own at the foothills. There was quite a high deposition of metals from those particulates that would be deposited closer right in those grazing allotments. But those dust particulates, we did predict that they would reach as far as the ranchers' actual, closer to where their houses are and where they might bring their herds back. And I'm sorry, I am not doing a good job, but you guys know. So they take their calves and the cows up into the foothills onto their grazing leases to get big and fat, and then they bring them back to sell them. But so where calves were doing their main growth before they go into feed production is on those grazing allotments where the most deposition of metals was happening. So that's what we predicted. And then in the end, I did a risk assessment. I can see it. Then in the end, when we did a risk assessment, we did predict risks to cattle and livestock and ranchers that would be up there, or if you had a cabin, such as one of the families that has a deeded cabin right there. There was human health risks. None of these receptors were considered in Banga's mine application. They didn't consider cattle are up there, or ranchers, or there's grazing leases. It's an entire gap in their original mine application. So that's the Pekisko Group report, and it's publicly available, similar to the materials Chris brought. We can provide it, but it's an interesting piece of the puzzle that no mine companies were aware of because they didn't talk to anyone in agriculture.
Okay, thank you. Quick question, and this is for Chris specifically. Why are we not seeing more from McCain's and Rogers when they depend heavily on irrigation.
Okay. I worked in that sector. I can tell you, those international companies that are family-owned do not want to get involved in local politics. Not at all. It's much easier for them to shut down the plant if they have to and just move somewhere else. Yep. That's what will happen. Is if the and I would say the fact that the mine companies and the Alberta government don't even seem to be aware of the agri-food industry and the processing plants in this area tells you everything you need to know. Okay, so this is our economy here. We don't have oil and gas. We have food production. We have an entire economy based on food production. The fact that that's not addressed in any mining applications is also a significant gap. So zero consultation. I don't know who they hired for their environmental assessments, but when they're not aware of the impact of the Chinook winds, they're not aware of the downstream populations and the downstream uses of the water, I would say they haven't done their work properly, and that's why they're not willing to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question, please.
I have listened to several people talk about coal mining and saying it takes a lot of water. And I'm thinking, okay, what's a lot of water? So I've done some work. Grassy Mountain, it appears, would use 1 billion liters of fresh water a year, plus 3 billion liters of recycled water. We have a shortage of water. Who's going to get the water? Northback or the farmers? And I think, Chris, I listened to you at a recent meeting where, is it the food industry that does $14 billion worth of produce in this area? So that's my first question. The second point is selenium in water. I've spoken with water scientists, national water scientists. There is no place in the world that has successfully removed selenium from water. It doesn't exist. And anybody who tries to tell us that it does is lying. The third point is, there is I don't know, the people here check into podcasts, but there is a young guy, Nate Pike, from The Breakdown, who has been slapped with a $6 million lawsuit, but that's a whole other story. He's the person who uncovered the corruption in healthcare to the tune of $615 million given to Sam Raish. Now,
Did you get your question,
my
please?
point is, Nate Pike is now back online, and on Sunday nights, beginning this Sunday at 8 o'clock, The Breakdown with Nate Pike, and he has done what he calls a very deep dive into the research of what's gone on at Grassy Mountain. And I assume that given his research, he's probably got a few documents on the backroom deals.
Okay, thank you.
I agree, and there are some people who said that they've successfully removed selenium from water in laboratories. I don't know if that's true or not, but I can tell you working in laboratories is very different than working with river water. That's what we have to deal with here. This is not a laboratory situation where you can control all the factors except for one. This is a situation where there's multiple things that you have to deal with and massive volumes of water that have to be treated. So yes, that's what our engineers told us. There is no place in the world that has successfully removed excess selenium from the water in municipal water treatment plants. That's correct. In terms of, I can't speculate on what Nate Pike might do, but I have my own suspicions, I just don't understand why we have a court process that has been completely disrespected, and whole companies can go behind the process to our government and completely overturn that. That should concern all Albertans. Is there any other legal process where you lose and you can go to the government and have it overturned by lobbying?
Okay, thank you. Next question, please.
My name is Darlene Dahl, and I'm a resident here of Lethbridge for the last, well, quite a few years. I partly want to say something and then ask. I fully support that we need to stop further advancement that will contaminate our environment. But at the same time, I was always told by my mom that you can get more flies with honey than with vinegar. And so I would suggest to people that if you're making comments to government or whatever levels you're trying to express your feelings about this to, that you give alternate ideas of what can go on to help economically or whatever in, again, like if we don't want the mine to go on and the government is saying, well, it's a matter of economy and it's going to make money, then we need to stress how many other things positively would happen without the mine, like agri-food and like tourism and culture from the tribes, and you know, like the positive things that can come from our beautiful country that we have. And I would like to know, you know, is that part of this process? We're not here just to complain, we're here to try to promote things as well. Is that something that is coming into these reports and these sessions as well? The promotion of what would be positive without the mine?
Okay, thank you.
Yep. We sympathize with the people in the Crowsnest Pass. We understand that they need jobs and they would like something else to do. The reality is that all the other places, Lethbridge, you know, back in the 1950s, abandoned coal mining. All these towns around here, Lethbridge used to be called Coal Banks. There's Coaldale, there's Colehurst. All these communities have moved on. And there's some wonderful ideas out there. I don't want to steal Elliot's thunder. I don't know if you know about the concept of Nappy's Playground. Some of the Pecani people are thinking, what about if we just did, would they pay us to do reclamation instead of coal mining? And could we turn that into something that's beautiful instead of something that's ugly? And, you know, there are opportunities. And in terms of the Crowsnest Pass, we would support the provincial government providing any other form of employment opportunity that benefits the region. And my argument, I've been involved in economic development for the 40 years I've been in Lethbridge. But every time we implemented and attracted a new investor, it was complementary to what we were already doing. It wasn't destructive to what was happening all around us. Why are we proceeding with a coal mine that is destructive to the agri-food industry and has the potential to do significant harm? It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, thank you.
I think you're spot on, and that's what we want to do, but the reality of being in these rooms are nice solutions that benefit communities don't benefit corporations. And that is ultimately it. So we put those forward. Every technical report I write, every review, it has recommendations to resolve any issue I've identified. You don't just leave them hanging. Nobody wants to just sit in a room and fight all the time. But we're not having the same discussion. We're talking about sometimes protecting the environment to the degree the public expects, considering the public and providing alternatives. That's not how corporations function. So there's something totally different at the heart of this when we're talking about energy development, and it's not it's not crown corporations. If it was Alberta running these as crown corporations, we'd be having different discussions. But these are private corporations that need to make money for their stakeholders, and I know nothing about that really, but that's what I've gained coming out of those rooms.
So just, I won't be long, but in terms of, you know, other things you could do to be positive about, as opposed to just simply opposing coal mining. I mean, a couple of things. One is, you know, it's easy to be very critical of the government, but, you know, they have established a process that does allow parties like the Livingstone Landowners Group and the Pekisco Group and others to the legal term is intervene and to provide their position. So that's why there was a 29-day hearing back in 2020. We all got the chance to say our piece, and some of us said no. There were lots of people who said that there are other things that you could do to generate employment in the Crowsnest Pass, ecotourism, all sorts of things. So but the nature of a hearing is that it is adversarial. You've got the company on one side, you have the interveners on the other. So it does tend to kind of breed or create a forum in which you're fighting. I mean, for lack of a better way to put it. So yes, you can put forward alternative ideas about what should happen with the land instead of coal mining. And you're given the opportunity to do that, which is fantastic. It's almost democratic right. But on the other hand, it does take place in this context, which can get kind of nasty and fight, it's kind of, as I said, adversarial.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Tailfeathers.
Hi, Esther Tailfeathers, Blood Tribe member, Makwinaskiaki. Very proud to be from the Blood Tribe tonight, and very proud of our representative here. Because I'm a physician, I'm very concerned about health, human health, and the health of our people. And I haven't heard that discussed very much tonight. But in the province of Alberta, when I first started working for Alberta Health Services around 2012, the life expectancy of Indigenous people in this province was 13 years less than the non-Indigenous people. Today, it's 18 years less, which means that in any civilized society, somebody would be saying, hey, what the hell is going on here? These people are dying and they're part of our population. There needs to be some discussion about the health impacts to Indigenous people and to our treaty partners here. And I did want to say that Treaty 7 is based on as long as the waters flow. And we need to remember that. We're all treaty people. Our treaty is based on as long as our waters flow. And I know that one of the tributaries of the Oldman River was dry this year. So what does that mean to our treaty process? What does that mean to us as treaty people, because you are part of this treaty as well? But I do want to speak about the health impacts. And I know that selenium has neurotoxicity as well, and there's no antidote to the neurotoxicity of selenium in individuals. A few years ago, the blood reserve suffered from scleroderma, which is a very rare disease where it's 14 in a million who get scleroderma. On the blood reserve, it was 1 out of 1,000. And many of those people died very painful deaths. Scleroderma is a very painful autoimmune disorder. So we don't know what the health impact is going to be to our people. And I think that there's enough of an argument there that my representatives can take this to the federal government and the provincial government and say, look, our people's health is at stake. Our treaty people, who are all in this room, health is at stake, and we need to be a leader in terms of saying our health is going to be impacted by this. Our children are going to be impacted. We are just barely getting through a crisis with the opioid crisis, and it's a mental health crisis. And I heard Mandy talk about what happened in Fort Chip. I worked there as well. And the perception that there's something in that water can destroy the culture that's fishing in that water, that's hunting the moose, that's eating the animals around there. The perception that our land and our water is going to be poisoned will affect our culture, because our people will not be fishing. Our people will not be doing the things that they traditionally do on their lands because we're afraid of what might be in that water. So the mental health impacts are going to be very high, not only to us, but to everybody in this room that cares about their people and their health. And so I'm just putting the question forward to Elliot, because I know everybody else has answered questions, and ask how important is our health to our chief and council.
Yes, thank you, Esther. Just FYI, Esther's my neighbor, and she's my first cousin. So, yeah, really good question. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm very new to leadership with with the Blood Tribe. So we're going into 3 months now. To me, and I know I can speak for the rest of our leadership, our health, especially of our people, is priority, or it should be a high priority. You know, I've been really, it's really been a steep learning curve over the past, since the election. We've gone through an orientation. We're one of the largest Indigenous populations in the country, and we've got one of the largest administrations in the country for Indigenous communities. So we've got a lot of challenges. There's some great opportunities we're trying to explore, but like Dr. Tailfeathers has mentioned, there's some big challenges. You know, just down the street here, you see our people every day. There's the homeless crisis, food security, the opioid crisis. And you know, a lot of it stems from intergenerational trauma. You know, a lot of our people are, I guess, lost because our language was you know, the government, through the residential school experience, tried to prevent us from speaking our language and practicing our culture. So a lot of our people have lost their identity. So you know, and we see some of the victims of you know, the results of what's happened intergenerationally. So I think, and you know, we're on the you know, the government fiscal year cycle. So we're going through our budget review now to see, okay, what's priority, who needs what, just like your municipal and your provincial and your federal governments. Okay, what's priority? Well, human health, education. So to me, that is a big priority. And health is one of our largest, they have one of the largest budgets of our administration, but it's still not enough. So you know, we're exploring ways, creative ways to, you know, to look for partners to be able to try to address, you know, a lot of the issues, the problems. We're seeing Band-Aid solutions, but those aren't good enough. It's just, for now, here's a Band-Aid, but let's look at long-term sustainable solutions to some of these problems. You know, we're not going to fix our problems on the blood reserve during my term. You know, we're certainly going to try. I'm gung-ho. I've got a lot of energy right now. So I hope, you know, I'm there. I'm an optimist. I really hope we can do better than we have. There are a lot of issues, and you know, I hate to go on and on here. I know we're near the end of our meeting, but yeah, Esther, I think I can speak for all of our leadership. Health is a big priority, and it'll be that way until we can try to see some results in a positive way. Mental health has a huge, it's huge with a lot of our people. COVID played a big part in that. You know, we're seeing it with our school kids, some of the mental health impacts from COVID, because they weren't allowed in class. So I think the teachers are really dealing with that now. So I'll end there, but yeah, we are gonna try the best we can to prioritize health, mental health especially, and try to address some of those issues. Thank you.
Okay, next question, please.
Hi, my name's Dace Coughlin. I ranch west of Stavely, neighbor of John Smith's. We run in the forestry right one ridge over from where the coal mine would be up at the head of the Old Man. We've been there since the early 1900s. Sorry. I have a specific question for Mr. Fitch, but I'd like to make a couple comments first, if I could. I'll be quick. And for some information for some people here that might not know, when the coal policy was first removed, when Jason Kenney was our premier, subsequent to him leaving political office, I'm not sure if everybody knows that he went to work for one of the largest law firms in Canada, Bennett Jones, as a special advisor. About 18 months ago, as an intervener, because I run cattle there, I commented to our local MLA and the premier and did not get a response from them. I did get a very nasty response from, guess who? Bennett Jones. And what twigged me was Corb's first line of questioning. I'm very concerned about the particulate matter downstream with us. So my question to Mr. Fitch is, I like to play nice with people, but at certain points when I don't believe our government's working in our best interest, is there a way of a class action lawsuit relative to the particular, for the particulate matter in specifics? And that's my question.
Okay, thank you.
Like, I know that's, but.
Yeah, I can't give you legal advice from up here on the rostrum. And I'm not a specialist in class action litigation, so there's that caveat as well. I mean, I've been practicing law long enough to know that I think it would be a pretty long throw. But I just don't know. I mean, I'm sorry, I can't really say anything more than that.
Okay, let's keep our questions and comments brief so we can get everybody accommodated here.
My question is for Ms. Olsgaard. I was at an event in Lethbridge about a month ago. It was a sort of a town hall on water usage, and it was hosted by Environment Minister Schultz. And all night long, when she was asked coal questions, she referred to these 4 or 5 government studies that were done at the behest of the government by government scientists. And a lot of us asked for them the next day, and to their credit, the government sent them to us. And as a layman, I read them, and they seemed to me to say, 2 of them, there were 4 studies that I looked at, 2 of them seemed to say that the coal mining is very bad for the air quality, and the other 2 said it was very bad for water quality. And the lead scientist that did those studies, his name is Colin Cook, and CTV asked to interview him, and the government wouldn't let him speak. Global did the same thing, they wouldn't let him speak. CBC did the same thing. So since the government won't interpret those for us, if you're familiar with them, can you summarize, was I correct in assuming that those didn't really support the government's position on coal mining, even though they commissioned the studies? Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I wasn't at the water forum in Lethbridge here, but yeah, I'm well aware of the studies and Dr. Colin Cook's research, and there's just a lot to unpack there. So I think we've talked about selenium in the water a lot. And so, yeah, Dr. Cook and Paul Drebnick and some of these other scientists, these are Government of Alberta scientists that receive funding to monitor the environment, and then they submit those to journals. I don't know if anyone here even is aware of like scientific journals and how you access articles in them, but they're very scientific. And so on your behalf, public servants are monitoring the environment in Alberta at low legacy coal mines. They're monitoring the environment associated with elk value and air emissions coming over the Rockies, around the Rockies, downstream. This is happening on your behalf by your government. So Dr. Colin Cook, other scientists, they publish these. They also submit abstracts to present at scientific conferences. The government of Alberta isn't letting them go to those conferences anymore and presenting their research. So unless you know how to access scientific journals and read that information, you're likely not getting the information. So the information you have available to you is a study that was done by Dr. Cook and his research team that was published on downstream legacy coal mine impacts around the Crowsnest area. And so it was from Tent Mountain, I think specifically, and there's elevated concentrations of selenium, so we did the numbers game earlier, right? 1 to 2 micrograms per liter, that's where we want to keep selenium at. Well, at the spoil pile, right there on Tent Mountain, the concentrations are 60 to 180 times higher, depending on which one of those. So that is an impacted site. It's a brownfield if you want to redevelop it. And then when you looked at Crowsnest Creek, I believe it was 10 to 20 times higher. Those are associated with that legacy mine. And I also want to remind you, the government of Alberta actually owns the liability for that. When you hear them say, Northback saying, we're going to clean it up, we're going to make it better, that means the government of Alberta is not cleaning it up on your behalf right now. This is the reality of it. So you have some of the most brilliant minds working from within the government of Alberta right now that are not being able to speak. I shouldn't be up here. Dr. Colin Cook should be up here. I'm trying to be a toxicologist that has decided that I'm going to speak out publicly and still try and be unbiased, but provide the general public with scientific information in a way they can access it so they can make decisions. It was to my great dismay that industry's not in this room, that people who have worked in coal mining are not in this room. I want those hard discussions. I want to talk about this and say, show me the treatment that gets you down to 1 to 2 micrograms per liter. So same with air. There is no way you can completely control particulate matter from surface coal mines. So the other publication by Dr. Cook and his research team was the Elk Valley mines, and that particulates, after all the dust mitigation, we're going to use water trucks. We're going to use more water, actually, and we're going to water that to try and prevent the dusts from moving too far. There was an air warning. I don't know if it was Sparwood, but it was somewhere around there the other day, from dust particulates specifically. There's not a natural source that's making it that high over there. It's the mines. So that's the reality of how they live in Elk Valley. They have to clean things constantly. Those are people's observations. But Dr. Cook's research said, there is accumulation of PAHs, and it's from the winds, from the coal mines, and I do believe they detected it coming over the Rocky Mountains into Window Lake on the Alberta side. So again, wasn't in the modeling domain for any of the original tech EIAs, but it's what was observed. You need to go back to your models. You need to refine them. Glencoe Tech's not going to do that. So this information is available to you. Your government public servant scientist should be able to talk to you. It shouldn't be Mandy Olsgaard up here. It's always, I know, everyone gets sick of me. But no one else can speak out from in the government, and other consultants maybe still need to make a living and won't take the risk. I just really quickly really appreciate your comment. Human health is not being considered in these assessments. You can do environmental, social health impact assessments, ESHAs. You can assess when you have higher mortality rates in communities that are impacted. We have methods for this, and they're being used around the world. We're not using them in Canada. We are not looking at our Indigenous people that way, and intergenerational trauma, and how loss of culture and spirit and addictions and all of that, none of that has been in an EI yet in Alberta. So anything that's approved has not considered maybe what we call a sensitive or a vulnerable population. There's space for it in the guidance, but it hasn't been leveraged. And if you're not, again, if Lethbridge, you're not in the regional study area for what a coal mine says they'll assess, if your First Nation's not in there, if you're Métis community, you will have no results. You're not considered. That coal mine is going forward, that anything, oil sands mine, it's going forward without having considered you.
Okay, I'd just like to...
Just in the interests of fairness, I will say that Benga did do a human health risk assessment, not mental. So, but these are, and we actually, the Livingstone group, hired an expert to, look at it, review it, critique it. The findings of the JRP were that the health risks from the project were acceptable, I guess. I mean, I think what Manny was talking about was a much kind of broader look, including on mental health. I don't remember specifically what health risks were considered in the health risk assessment. Do you? What were they? Dust or, yeah. Anyways, there was a health risk assessment. and for better or worse, you know, the JRP concluded the health risk was acceptable. Turned the mine down for other reasons, but not for health.
Yeah, I think the fact that taxpayer paid scientists are not allowed to comment publicly on their own reports should concern everybody in this room. Secondly, if you're like me and you struggle to understand scientific reports that are published in scientific journals, we actually had our scientists who provide advice to the Water for Food group do summaries of the 4 reports that were referred to. And if you're lucky enough to pick up one of the 26 copies at the back, the summaries are there for you to read. So those of you that struggle to understand the science reports, just like me, I can actually understand what they are by reading this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, we're getting short on time, and so we'll give preference to people who haven't asked a question first. So go ahead, please.
I think most of the wind has been taken out of my sails already. I had sort of 2 questions, and I'm not sure they're even relevant, but my first was about the legacy of the historic contamination out there and whether we thought, I guess there is no project, but do we think that Northback will actually remediate that? Is it possible? Is it part of the plan? Would we be happy with that? The second part of my question, I spent the last 8 years living and working with the northernmost First Nation in Alberta, the Tabati Denisuflene in Treaty 8, out of Fort Fitzgerald. And I was lucky enough to work with people like Mandy, brilliant minds who would read scientific reports on, you know, why, you know, when elders come to me and say, why are we getting sick? Why are our animals disappearing? Why does the air smell bad? Why is our medicinal plants, you know, not tasting the same? I, you know, was able to work with great people who could help me to understand the Western science components and bring together the knowledge bases. And I think some really cool work that I saw happening in Treaty 8 was around the development of Indigenous thresholds and indicators. You know, Mandy was a part of the surface water quality for the Lower Athabasca Regional Plan area. And then also there's like the human health part with Indigenous indicators and bringing together both, you know, the Indigenous worldview with the Western science components. And I'm just wondering if this is something, and I understand this is a brand new chief and council, so maybe too early for you to comment. You probably don't even know what your consultation office is up to yet. Also wondering if you've been contemplating maybe like a Yahé style, like Blueberry, Northeast BC decision on cumulative effects. Some ways to kind of set yourselves up, you know, to be proactive to deal with some of these issues. And I'll leave it at that. And I was also going to say, as long as the water flows. So I'm glad that came up because it's a treaty. It's in the treaties, you know. And as much as, you know, I'm a settler person who's living in Treaty 7 now, I am also a treaty person. I'm only here because of those treaties. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. Actually, I have some knowledge of what our consultation department's doing. So, you know, it's really sad, the government's position, well, I'm talking about Alberta. You know, there's this treaty, you know, that's got legal obligations, but they, excuse my language, they fight like hell to not honor their obligations. Before we entered into settler treaties with our people, we had treaties prior to that with our neighboring Indigenous communities, and most of them were honored. There was a couple that weren't. I'm not going to mention any names. But we honored those, and the way we didn't sign a piece of paper, we smoked a pipe to ratify those agreements, whether they were peace or those kinds of things. But you know, it's sad. The governments aren't honoring their obligations to those treaties. And so what we have to do to hold them accountable, to honor their obligations, is spend a whole bunch of our own revenue on taking legal action, you know? And that's the sad thing. You know, be honest and act in good faith. Do they do that? No. But you know, we've been here a long time. I'm pretty sure we're not going anywhere. So we're going to continue to be here and work with our neighbors, now neighbors, and good people that are in the room tonight to fight these kinds of proposed developments that are going to threaten the essence of our life, which is one of them is water. You know, you know, we all know it's about money, and it's sad, but you know, we got to continue to do that. And so the sad thing is, I'm glad you mentioned that, Dr. Dale Feathers. As long as the water flows, that's an agreement, that's a treaty obligation. Is it happening? Not really. But we have to work with, you're all treaty people in here, whether you understand that or not. We have to work together to make these things, you know, make the government honor these things and pull together, aside from all of our differences, and hold our governments accountable and sustain some of the awesome, beautiful resources that we have here in this part of the continent. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Bev?
This will be the last question.
Hi. Is this good? Yeah. So in the spirit of SACPA, my name's Leona Jacobs. My question is a big picture one, and I think I'm going to direct it to Gavin and to Elliot. Given that, so I was part of the pushback of 2020 to 2022. I was one of the foot soldiers, writing letters and phoning and all this other stuff. And I'm less so now for personal reasons, but I'm still in the game. When it happened in 2020 and 2022 to 2022, when we got the moratoriums said, until we've had some discussion about land management. Now that's blown out of the water. So my question, big picture question, knowing that this has happened in other places thanks to a response I got on one of my posts on social media, and given the fact that the eastern slopes are the water towers for the prairie region, is there any way that we can actually stop having to fight this every other year and actually somehow have the eastern slopes declared a person?
This is the last question. Okay.
Yeah, I know there's, I'm certainly not close to it, but I mean, I know there is a movement in law to try to give essentially person rights, which means you could sue or appear in court, to rivers and animals and trees. How possible that would be in this context, I mean, I really can't say. I mean, if you really want this issue to finally go away, the solution has to be political. It's not going to be legal. I mean, the honest truth is when we did the JRP hearing in 2020, I almost fell off my chair when the decision came out and they denied the application. I thought for sure they were going to get an approval. I'm just being completely honest. That's usually how it goes down. I know the NDP have proposed legislation to basically ban coal mining on the eastern slopes. I'm not going to take a political stance, but I would say it would take legislation to make, I mean, of course, laws can be repealed, subsequent governments, but it's harder, right? So I think if you really want to change things, as always in a democracy, it comes down to change the government. If you don't like the current government, you got to change it and then lobby the new government to ban once and for all coal mining from the eastern slopes. Dealing with it on a project by project by project basis is not productive.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll make this quick. So I forgot to mention cumulative effects the previous lady had asked. Yeah, I mean, it all factors in. So I think we really have to consider that. The Blueberry First Nation was mentioned. That was a precedent-setting case in Canada. So there's a whole bunch of compensation for all of the industry around that community. So yeah, I think we can certainly have a look at some of the cumulative effects that are, in my case, affecting the Blood Tribe. But in the bigger scope of this region, it's affecting you too. Dr. Tailfeathers mentioned scleroderma. That's pretty alarming. I wonder how, what's the prevalence of scleroderma in Lethbridge or in this area? Yeah, a really good question on personhood acknowledgement. I'm aware of some of those cases, like New Zealand. There was another recent one. I'm not totally up to speed on that, but I am somewhat aware of it. That's a really good, you just got my brain thinking here. As Blackfoot people, we believe, and some might say, these damn Indians, they're starting to think like, but we've always believed that, and if he's retired or semi-retired, Dr. Littlebear, he used to teach Native American studies at the U of L here. So he talks about our Blackfoot ways of knowing and our just what we believe, our worldview. And so we believe it's in a constant state of flux. So there's flux in everything. And I learned this when I went back to school in 2016 to try to finish my degree at the U of L. I had to take Biology 1000, and oh my goodness. I hadn't seen the table of the elements since high school in 1981. So that was a really steep learning curve. But it brought back, and I had asked I had to get a tutor about a month in. I was like, oh man, I need some help on this. I'm getting too old to remember all these. And these other kids were fresh out of high school. Anyway, so we were talking about molecules and atoms and those kinds of things. So my tutor, she was talking about, well, there's so many electrons that float around, the orbits, and I'm like, well, how do you know, like, they're moving around? She's like, well, you know what? We really don't. We just, I'm like, oh, okay, good. So really, that's a pretty sound hypothesis. But when I asked her, and she was a graduate student, she couldn't answer. So it all gets back to that flux. And so what we believe as Blackfoot people is everything has a spirit. Us in here, the plants, the animals, the water, rocks are animate. They're made up of molecules. So there's flux in rocks, in the water. So you know what? We should maybe try to use that argument to get personhood acknowledged for maybe the Oldman River and maybe the eastern slopes. Because we're so closely connected, we're made up of, a lot of the same molecules. So anyway, that would be my answer. So I've got a lot of thinking to do, and I've got 3 years and 9 months to try to make an impact here. So thank you.
Okay, our schedule went a little wonky, but that's fine because this is a very important issue. I'd like to now go, each panelist, you've got 2 minutes to sum up your thoughts on this and what maybe suggest one specific action we might want to take as participants in this event this evening. Chris, start with you.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. Our group started the petition when we heard Brian Jean say when 1,953 people in the Crowsnest Pass voted for the coal mine, democracy had spoken. None of you were consulted. You're all affected. We started our petition to give you a voice. We have copies on the way out. We encourage you to sign it if you agree with what we have done. There is an Indigenous expression that I found, and I think it's from an American Indigenous person. It was, when the last tree is cut, and the last fish is killed, and the last river is poisoned, then you will see you can't eat money. We're at that situation now. Our Indigenous people do give a form of personhood to the Oldman River. It's called Napi. Napi has provided life for people who living along the banks of the Oldman River for thousands of years. Now we have a coal mine threatening the life of Napi. It's time that we all came together and supported our Indigenous people, and we came together as a community to fight the threat to our lifestyles and protect the integrity of our water. That's my message. I hope that people will educate themselves and contact your MLAs, contact both government MLAs and the opposition MLAs. This is not about left versus right. This is about right versus wrong. Express your voices. Make sure your voice is heard, because they think you don't matter.
Thank you. Mandy.
Yeah, I did a lot of talking. I guess I just want to leave with you, technology isn't always there, but the information's available and the science is available. So I do a lot of panel discussions like this. I get asked by the public a lot. I work half of my year. I'm in Indigenous communities in the north on the land with them. You know, science can get us so far, but if you don't have access to it, you're only going to believe what you see in a post or maybe what you hear from industry or, you know, dig in. And I think that's really what I talked about a lot here today. I hope you believe what I put forward. There's references for all of that. It's one side of the story, but you know, it's really concerning to me that you have public servants, that the Government of Alberta is doing studies. They've been looking at coal mining and the impacts. They've been observing it and recording it since the 80s in Alberta. We have these case studies, but somehow powerful lobbying and maybe just like even one piece of scientific information that doesn't align with all the other evidence is carrying more weight in some of these decisions. And as a scientist, I don't know how to address that. There's some really famous quotes by really much more brilliant people than I are that I'll summarize. And, you know, Gus Speth, with 30 years of good science, I thought we could solve this. I really thought we would get around it. But what it came down to was greed, and scientists don't know how to deal with that. So it's not such a message of hope, but you know, the information is there. I'll help you access it. There's other scientists who are trying to help you access it. But if you're not banging down doors and screaming at the government right now, it's not getting heard.
Thank you.
Well, I think I'll just sort of follow up on on my very last comment about politics being the answer as opposed to law. I believe that the reason the government, you know, when they rescinded the coal policy in May of 2020, there was such an outcry among Albertans that they that even the government, the Jason Kenney government, had to do something. So it wasn't because of anything lawyers did, it was because of what people did. And so it was the outcry of regular Albertans that caused the government to reverse course. Since then, Kenney's out, we have a new premier, you know, same party, but new leadership. And now they seem to have kind of gone backslid a little bit, at least, you know, some of us would think. And so the answer is the same. You've got to, you know, raise your voice and protest and get the government to change the policy. And as I said, ideally get them to change the law.
Thank you. Elliot.
Okay, I came a bit prepared. So just going to read some of this. Everyone in this room relies on the scarce and precious resources of the Oldman Watershed. This is something we cannot take for granted and cannot assume that we can ever replace. This watershed is sacred to the Siksikaitsitapi, or the Blackfoot people, and should be considered sacred by everyone who lives in the watershed and relies on the Oldman River system. You've heard this before. The last proposed mine in this watershed, the Grassy Mountain Mine, underwent one of the most thorough environmental reviews of any coal mine in the Crowsnest Pass region. It's exceptionally rare for these types of applications to be declined. Nonetheless, based on all the expert evidence in front of federal and provincial regulators, they found that the potential impacts of the mine unequivocally outweighed any short-term potential benefits. If that's the case with one mine, imagine the entire Oldman Watershed full of new mines. We won't get a second chance to get this right. We need to come together as Blackfoot people and settlers, Southern Albertans, and work together to protect the sacred area for our own well-being and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the panelists for your presentations this evening, your responses. You're well informed, and I think we all are leaving here with a lot more information than when we came in. And so thank you for that. We have one more thing to do, and you want to come around here and use this?
Hi, I just wanted to draw your attention. Everybody in the panel is saying what's next, what you can do. As the Chinook Water Alliance, the Chinook Water Alliance is a loose alliance of several groups who are fighting against coal. Together we put together a brochure that actually has a panel there for what you can do next. So there's several websites that'll give you some direction, has references to some of the material here. But if you could be involved, the only thing that's going to make a difference is to make your voice heard. They don't care about science or anything else, but they'll listen to you. So please pick up a brochure on your way out. Okay, thank you.
How it's been distributed.
We just printed 16,000 of these. 13,000 went into mailboxes from pretty much Fort Macleod west and north to High River. 13,000 went out 2 days ago. Thank you.
Again, thank you very much. And there's also a media package here if any from the media didn't get a chance to interview anyone. I have it.